A white van sat idling just beyond the palace gates. Windows tinted, engine running. Most people in the crowd thought nothing of it, just another delivery. But one 9-year-old girl knew better. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She raised her hand and gave the secret signal every child is taught, but prays never to use. One royal guard saw it. And in that instant, 3 centuries of protocol shattered. But what did he uncover inside that van? And why did it bring the entire ceremony to a dead stop? Before we show you exactly what unfolded in those terrifying minutes, make sure you're subscribed and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. The late morning sun pulled across Buckingham Palace, turning the creamstone golden. Tourists pressed 3 deep against the black gates, phones raised, voices weaving together in half a dozen languages. Behind the ancient walls, the regimental band warmed up with brass notes that echoed off stone. To everyone gathered there, this was pure pageantry. But to Sergeant Marcus Kellan, standing motionless in his scarlet tunic and towering bear-skin hat, it was something else entirely. It was vigilance. At 38, Marcus carried himself with gravity earned from years in Helmand Province, where he'd learned to read crowds like newspapers. Shrapnel in his left calf had left him with a barely noticeable limp, but it had sharpened his instincts to a razor's edge. His scarlet tunic fit perfectly, gold buttons catching sunlight. The rifle against his shoulder wasn't just for show, though tourists pointing cameras had no way of knowing that. Standing still for hours was its own endurance test, but Marcus used that stillness productively. His eyes moved constantly, cataloging faces, noting patterns, filing away details that might matter when everything went wrong. The band struck its first proper chord of the day, brass blazing across the forecourt like a call to arms. The crowd surged forward with collective excitement, but through all that golden sunlight and pageantry, Marcus's attention snagged on something that didn't fit the pattern. A little girl stood at the edge of the crowd, maybe 9 or 10 years old, wearing a blue cotton dress with a cardigan that hung loose on her small frame. Her dark hair was pulled back in a braid that was coming undone, one ribbon trailing in the breeze. She carried a battered satchel that looked like it had seen better years, its strap fraying where it bit into her shoulder. While every other child in that square was wide-eyed and laughing, pointing at the scarlet uniforms and gleaming instruments, she wasn't looking at the ceremony at all. Her gaze was fixed somewhere else entirely, across the service road, where a white delivery van sat idling at the curb. Marcus felt that familiar tingle at the base of his skull, the one that had kept him alive in places where paying attention was the difference between coming home and not. The van looked ordinary enough, peeling paint, faded courier logo on the side, the kind of vehicle that blended into London traffic like water into water. But it had been sitting there for 20 minutes with its engine running, exhaust puffing steadily into the morning air. What bothered Marcus more was the girl's behavior. Children noticed things adults missed, but they usually expressed it differently. Squirming, tugging sleeves, asking endless questions. This girl was doing none of that. She walked small, deliberate circles at the crowd's edge, like she was trying to decide whether to step forward or disappear entirely. Every few seconds, her eyes would dart from the van to the guards, then back again, calculating something. She wasn't lost. She wasn't confused. She was afraid. Marcus shifted his weight almost imperceptibly, enough to keep her in his peripheral vision without drawing attention from the cameras pointed his way. Whatever was pulling her gaze toward that van was strong enough to eclipse everything else happening around her. The music, the pageantry, the once-in-a-lifetime spectacle that had drawn tourists from around the world. The band's volume swelled, drums rolling like distant thunder, and the girl took a hesitant step toward the ceremonial ropes. But she wasn't moving toward the music. She was positioning herself where Marcus could see her clearly, where there was no mistaking her intent. That's when she looked directly at him and raised her hand, palm open, thumb tucked, fingers folding down in a movement so quick it could have been mistaken for brushing hair from her face. But Marcus knew better. He'd been briefed on the universal distress signal taught in schools across Britain, designed for moments when screaming might make things worse, when a child couldn't risk being heard. The signal meant one thing and one thing only: help me. Every fiber of 3 centuries of tradition told him to stay locked in place. Guards didn't move. Guards didn't break formation. Guards were living statues who absorbed whatever chaos swirled around them without flinching. But as the girl repeated the signal, smaller this time, more desperate, Marcus felt his body decide before his mind caught up. The crack of his boots against ancient cobblestone split the morning air like a gunshot. Every head turned toward the sound, phones swinging his direction, tourists gasping in confusion. In 362 years of ceremonial duty, no guardsman had ever broken formation. Until now, Marcus moved with the fluid economy of muscle memory, forged in places where hesitation meant death. His scarlet tunic blazed against the pale stone as he strode toward the rope barrier, rifle shifting from ceremonial angle to something more purposeful. The bare skin that had shadowed his features now seemed to crown him with authority rather than hide him in tradition. The crowd parted before him like water, confusion rippling through the mass of bodies. Some laughed nervously, thinking this might be some kind of special performance they hadn't read about in their guidebooks. Others sensed something deeper happening, something that had nothing to do with pageantry. When Marcus reached the rope line, he knelt slightly to meet the girl's eyes beneath the shadow of his hat. Her face was pale, but determined, like she'd been carrying a terrible weight, and had finally found someone strong enough to help her bear it. "Over there," she whispered, voice almost lost beneath the brass and drums, still playing behind the palace gates. Her chin tilted toward the service lane, where the white van continued its patient idle. Marcus kept his expression neutral, but his voice carried the calm authority of someone who had commanded soldiers under fire. "Stay here." She shook her head desperately, clutching her satchel like a shield. "They told me not to say a word," she breathed. And in those 7 words, Marcus heard everything he needed to know about why she was afraid. He pressed the radio button on his cuff, keeping his tone steady, though his jaw had locked tight with understanding. "Control, this is Post 7. Possible child safety concern. White delivery van adjacent to service lane. Driver occupied. Request immediate security support." The response crackled back through static. "Copy that. Post 7. Security dispatching. Maintain visual." Marcus rose to his full height, gesturing for nearby tourists to gently guide the girl back from the barrier. She pressed herself against the ropes, small fingers white-knuckled around the metal, her eyes following him like he was the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly become liquid and dangerous. He turned toward the van, and the moment his boots hit the service road, everything clicked into focus with the crystal clarity that came from years of reading situations where lives hung in the balance. The van sat wrong. Engine idling with that steady rumble that spoke of someone ready to move at a moment's notice, but no clipboard visible on the dashboard. No delivery schedule tucked behind the windscreen wipers. No hazard lights flashing the way they should for a legitimate stop. The paint on the panels had blistered and peeled in patches, revealing mismatched colors beneath, like someone had tried to change the vehicle's appearance in a hurry. Through the tinted windscreen, Marcus could make out the pale silhouette of the driver. The man wasn't fidgeting the way people do when they're legitimately waiting for something. He wasn't checking his phone or drumming his fingers on the steering wheel. He just sat there with unnatural stillness, hands positioned somewhere below Marcus's line of sight. Marcus approached with measured steps. Behind him, phones clicked, some tourists clapping, thinking this was unscheduled theater. But the tight line of his jaw said otherwise. He stopped 1 pace from the driver's window. "Step out of the vehicle." The driver turned slowly, revealing bland features arranged into harmless confusion. But his eyes were wrong, too calculating. "I'm waiting for a friend," the man said with false calm. "Engine off. Step out of the vehicle," Marcus repeated. That's when he saw it. rope coiled on the passenger seat, and beyond it, a child's jacket with pink lining crumpled against the rear floor. On the dashboard, a smartphone glowed with an unlocked message. "Stand by for green light. Hands where I can see them," Marcus ordered, shifting his rifle to ready position without raising it to his shoulder. The driver's nostrils flared, but he lifted his hand slowly to the steering wheel, fingers spread wide in a mockery of cooperation. His eyes, though, had gone cold and calculating, like a predator caught in a trap, and measuring his options for escape. Marcus reached the side door. The handle sat flush but unlocked, and when he tugged it open with deliberate care, the mechanism clicked with the sound of inevitability. The door slid back, and the world contracted to a single moment of horrible clarity. 2 children lay crumpled on the van's bare metal floor, wrists bound with zip ties, duct tape sealing their mouths. A boy and girl, siblings by the look of their matching school trainers. Their shallow breathing betrayed heavy sedation. The crowd outside Buckingham Palace gasped as word spread. The regimental band faltered, brass notes choking into silence. Ceremony was gone. What replaced it was something darker. Sergeant Marcus Kellan froze with recognition, memories of war zones flashing back. But this was London in broad daylight. His rifle snapped into position as the driver reached for the gear shift. "Don't." The single word rang with lethal promise. The crowd shifted from murmurs to shouts, phones capturing every moment that would dominate headlines within the hour. Behind Marcus, the little girl who had given him the distress signal pressed her hands over her mouth, tears streaming. She had known. Somehow, she had known. Marcus ignored her. His rifle stayed trained on the driver, whose mask of feigned innocence cracked into rage. Palace security surged forward, surrounding the van, weapons ready. "Guard 7, report." 2 minors inside, bound and gagged, breathing shallow, driver refusing to comply. The order was given. Lockdown. The crowd roared, some trying to push closer, others dragging their children away. Suddenly, the little girl who had signaled Marcus broke free, darting to his side and clutching the scarlet wool of his tunic. "They're my friends," she whispered. "He took them from school yesterday." Marcus widened his stance, shielding her from the driver's glare. The driver spat venom. "Liar!" Security ordered him to exit. Instead, he yanked the gear shift. Tires screeched as the van lurched forward. The crowd shrieked. "Engine off, now!" Marcus's command thundered across the courtyard. The driver froze, caught between the rifle barrel and his own doomed escape plan. Then, with a guttural roar, he bolted. Palace security swarmed, dragging him to the ground. Metal cuffs snapped shut as tourists erupted in gasps and stunned applause. But the chaos wasn't finished. A second suspect sprinted from the far edge of the lane. Officers gave chase. A detective tackled him to the pavement, scattering rope, duct tape, and a map of London marked with circled schools. The girl clung tighter to Marcus. "That's him too. He was at the gates." Sirens wailed as police cars and ambulances stormed into the forecourt. Paramedics rushed to the van, cutting restraints, peeling duct tape, and wrapping the children in thermal blankets. Ellie and Callum Harper, siblings missing since yesterday, stirred back to consciousness as the crowd stood in reverent silence. The girl's voice shook as she explained, "He told me I'd be in trouble if I said anything. He said no one would believe me." Marcus rested a steadying hand on her shoulder. The children's parents soon arrived, weeping with relief as they held them tight. But Marcus was pulled into an interrogation room, his tunic still damp with sweat. A major sat across from him, flanked by an investigator. "You abandoned your ceremonial post," the major said gravely. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, unwavering. "You understand that breaks centuries of tradition?" "Yes, sir." "Then explain." Marcus met his gaze. "Because a child made the distress signal. 2 others were unconscious in that van. With respect, sir, no tradition is worth more than innocent lives." The silence was heavy. Then the door creaked open. The little girl stepped in, her mother's arm around her shoulders. If he hadn't moved, she said simply, Ellie and Callum would be gone forever. He listened when no one else did. The room froze. Even the investigator stopped writing. The major cleared his throat. There will be inquiries, but the regiment stands behind decisions made to save lives. Dismissed. As Marcus left, Emma pressed something into his hand. A drawing. A guardsman in scarlet stood beside a small figure in a blue dress, shielding her from a white van. At the bottom, in neat handwriting, "Thank you for seeing my signal. Love, Emma." Later that afternoon, the ceremony resumed, music rising once more. But those who had witnessed the morning knew they had seen something beyond pageantry. Tourists whispered, pointing, "That's him. That's the guard who moved." And across the forecourt, Emma smiled through the crowd, whispering to her mother, "That's the one who listened when I couldn't speak." Marcus didn't move, couldn't break formation, but he tilted his head slightly, just enough for Emma to see. She nodded back. The ceremony went on, but the meaning had changed. One soldier had proven that sometimes duty means breaking protocol, because some duties transcend every rule ever written. If this story moved you, make sure to smash that like button and hit subscribe with notifications turned on, because stories like this deserve to be shared, and we upload fresh content every single day. Share this video with someone who still thinks the Royal Guards are just for show. They need to see what really happened on that forecourt, what it looks like when duty means choosing humanity over tradition. Your next Royal Guard story is already waiting for you on screen. Click it now and I'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same place, with another moment that proves sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons, but with the courage to act when everyone else is just watching.